Since Magento can contain modules in app code or under vendor, we have to ask ourselves, where do we develop custom modules? In a nutshell, we can work either under app code or with a little composer trick, we can work directly in vendor. Both approaches have benefits and drawbacks. As a freelancer, I had the opportunity to work in different environments. And I find most merchant developers place their code in app code like the Magento core team does. Extension developers, whose extensions are installed on many different versions of Magento, tend to prefer working in vendor. It is also possible to take a hybrid approach, where the extension development happens in app code, but the modules are then installed as a composer package in vendor during a deployment build. So, what are the drawbacks and benefits? In app code, all we have to do is we have to create the folders and files. We can directly start developing. We can keep all modules in a single repository if we want to. This can reduce complexity a lot. Monorepo versus split repo is an ongoing debate in our industry, but both work. Of course, we could also keep modules in individual repositories, even if we develop under app code. In vendor, we have to take a little more complex route. We have to create the module directory first with a composer JSON in a separate directory branch, for example, local source. And then we have to create a Git repository within the module directory and add that as a path source to the root composer JSON file of our project. And then we have to install our new module with composer, which will symlink the module into vendor. And then we can start the actual development. The exact details will be covered in a later episode. Keeping all code in one repo is a natural match for merchant developers. The modules will only ever be installed in one or maximal 2 versions of Magento. Keeping each module in a separate repository is a lot of unnecessary overhead. But for extension developers, it's natural to keep each module in its own repository anyway. From their point of view, each module is its own product. It has to be installed and tested with many Magento versions. So the developer demands are very different compared to a merchant developer. And then there are also agency or system integrated developers. If the agency develops a lot of custom extensions that are shared between client merchants, it makes sense to use separate repositories. Agencies tend to have a higher fluctuation, and the added complexity of developing in vendor might be a challenge for junior developers. They might be productive quicker if they can just go ahead and develop directly under app code. So in my experience, many agencies indeed develop modules under app code, but still keep each module in a separate repository. If the module is required by another client, it can be installed with Composer easily. One thing to keep in mind though is that if a module is installed under app code, even if it has a Composer JSON file, Composer itself doesn't know about this module. It only knows about packages that were installed by it. So any dependencies that are listed in the Composer JSON file are not checked. Again, for merchant developers, this isn't usually a problem at all. In fact, updating all dependencies for each module during a Magento upgrade is a lot of work. It's easier to simply not list them in a custom module, since compatibility has to be tested anyway. There also is a Composer Merge plugin that allows to configure additional paths in the root Composer JSON. That way, we can keep modules in app code and still get full Composer integration. Once again, Magento gives us a choice without a single right answer. I believe this is a good thing, as the requirements of developers can be so diverse, depending on their environment. You will have to evaluate your needs and then make some choices. First, if you want to keep modules in a separate repository, that is, if each module is its own product, or if you want to keep all modules together in a single repository, that is, if the whole Magento instance is the product you are creating. If you want a monorepo, then keep your modules in app code. Otherwise, you have to make another choice. Do you want to keep your modules in app code or under render? Since you see each module as its own product, you will still, in any case, want to ensure that they are Composer installable. Here in Mage2TV, we will use app code to develop modules. But that doesn't mean it's the only right option. Evaluate your needs, take your pick, try it out, and re-evaluate after some time. Your first choice isn't etched in stone. You can choose again at a later time.